Have a look at a gearbox selector mechanism.
So there's the drain plug there and the lever plug there. Yep. And then if you come out,
we're going to have a look inside the gearbox. We're going to remove the fifth gear cover.
that just spins well.
This houses the fifth gear. It's external to the rest of the gears in the gearbox. So here we see the fifth gear cover, and now here's the reverse light switch. It provides power to the reverse lights when the reverse gear is selected. So we're now going to remove the remaining bolts and split the gearbox, removing the top cover. This will allow us to see all the gear selector mechanism and to see how it operates. Once all the bolts are removed, we can gently remove the top cover. This will show us the gears. You can see the inner bearing race there. If we look at the two shafts there, we can see the lay shaft on the right and our gearbox main shaft on the left. Here we see our gear selector mechanism. This allows us to select one gear at any one time.
As it moves gear.
And here we see the selector fork, moving the selector hub to select the gear.
And then can we come down to the bottom? A bit better. Can you get that one?
As we operate the selector mechanism, it moves the selector hub up and down. This one is the reverse gear.
And then if we can come into the actual linkage.
We know that because it's got straight cut teeth.
I can show reverse too.
To enable the car to go in reverse, we have a reverse gear. For a forward motion, when the driving gear is in a clockwise direction, the driven gear will go in an anti-clockwise direction. So to provide a means of reverse, again we'll have our driving gear going in a clockwise direction. This time we'll introduce an idler gear, so that will then go in an anti-clockwise direction, and that then will drive the driven gear in a clockwise direction. This is how we obtain the reverse gear on the car. So you can see the idler gear below there.
And you started it now.
So all the gears are free to rotate on the gearbox main shaft. They are only locked into position on the main shaft when that gear is selected. So this is neutral position at the moment, and that's the reverse idler gear. So when reverse gear is selected, the idler comes up and it then connects the gearbox main shaft to the lay shaft.
I just show that going anti-clockwise.
And that provides the reverse gear.
It's not easy to see that.
No, I don't know, you've seen it there.
Okay, now we'll come back out of reverse and go into first. Yeah, then that'll be.
So we select another gear. You can see the shaft output shaft will rotate in a different direction than when it did in reverse. You see, as the reverse gear is not selected, the idler isn't in contact with any gear.
See that lever moving?
Here we can see the selector
The
mechanism
next one there.
as it selects one gear at one time. It can only select one gear at one time due to the nature of the gearbox linkage, and this will prevent the gearbox from locking up if more than one gear was selected. Here we see the fifth gear, that's it selected there. So this would have been a 4-speed box, and the manufacturer just modified it slightly and put the fifth gear in the end. So we can now put the cover back on and tighten the bolts back up. And find the final torque to the correct setting. And finally, we'll screw in the reverse light switch.
I'll just show the gear selectors now.
And we'll just give it a wee check to check selecting all the gears.
I'll do it down this way.
We'll now have another look at selector forks and detents to see how they work. Here we see a selector shaft with 2 grooves cut in it. So when it's in neutral, the ball bearing, you'll see the ball bearing in there, ball bearings, they will sit in these grooves. So each set of rods will have grooves in them. So when you select a gear, the ball is pushed up into that groove, resulting in the selector rod not being able to move. So when all the rods are in neutral, each rod can move. But as soon as one rod moves and selects a gear, it will push the ball up into the other shaft to stop it moving. This prevents more than one gear being selected at any one time. Also, as well as these, we have a means of, we use spring-loaded detents, just another ball bearing with a spring behind it. This prevents it jumping out of gear. So we'll remove the spring, and that's what works, the spring in the ball. You can see the selector rod has 3 grooves at this end. The middle one is neutral. This one that the ball's in at the moment is for 3rd gear. It's a 3rd gear detent, holds it in gear. That's the neutral, holds it in neutral. And that's the 4th gear detent. It just stops it jumping out of gear. You have to push, when the gear's selected, it pushes the ball into the spring and it's spring loaded. Here we can see the selector fork mechanism as we move in and out, and this is what the selector fork hits against, enabling the whole assembly to move the gear into mesh. So each one moves in turn, one way for one gear and one way for the other gear.